Hi, welcome to Lesson 4. This is the part of our lesson and project where we're going to do a little bit of research on an adaptation. Now, this might feel like the end of the project because we're going to be making a presentation and speaking, but remember, the end of the project is actually when you make your human survival product. So this lesson might give you some really great ideas. And if you choose to research an adaptation for this lesson, you might choose to use it for your human survival product, but then again, you might choose something completely different. So we're going to go through the slides together. I'm going to go through the lesson plan, show you how to do your research document, and get you started on the research for today. So the adaptation research lesson is all about taking one animal adaptation and really digging deep to find out more about it. Why do they have the adaptation? How does it help them survive? And you're going to present this adaptation to the class. This is adapted from the Mosamac Science website under their lesson called The Make. So these slides are from them. So let's take a look. So some adaptations make perfect sense. For instance, this stick bug looks like a stick. You might know right off the bat that that's for hiding so that the stick bug doesn't get eaten. But you might look at something like a camel with these really weird looking humps on its back and have no clue why a camel's back would be shaped that way. Peacock feathers are another example of a strange adaptation, but if you were paying very close attention in the crash course video yesterday, you heard that peacock feathers are a display to attract a mate, so it does serve a purpose. So animals and plants are both adapted to their environment. Some are better adapted than others. Stop and think about why plants and animals have certain traits. Here's an example that we've talked about quite a bit, the peppered moths. Why do animals have certain traits? Why do plants have certain traits? Pause the video, discuss, and then come back. So traits are really just genes that you inherit from parents, and traits give us the looks that we have. So these are both peppered moth species, and they just happen to have different genes that give them different wing colors. And in a population, there's usually a whole variety of different traits. In humans alone, there's lots and lots of different hair color and eye color. And some traits in some populations do help the organism to survive. And unfortunately, some organisms that don't have the traits find it harder to survive. And then they don't live as long, and then they don't reproduce and don't pass those traits to their offspring. So let's review adaptation together. All right. First, you can identify any trait. Then you have to ask yourself, does it fit the environment or help reproduction? If the answer is yes, and the animal is more likely to survive and reproduce, then more animals with that trait will appear in the population. If the trait doesn't really help the organism to fit into its environment or it harms the organism, that animal is less likely to survive or reproduce, and then there will be fewer animals with that trait or population. And just to be clear, there's plenty other traits that organisms might have that really don't help or harm their survival rate. So there are many kinds of adaptations that we've already looked at. Camouflage is one we've discussed quite a bit with the peppered moths. You might choose to find an organism that's very well adapted in camouflage to research today. Okay, mimicry is another one we've talked about. Does anyone know the name of these two snakes? One is venomous, one is not. If you're not sure, look it up. Okay, the giraffe has a very interesting adaptation. Giraffes today have really, really long necks. And you can actually find in the fossil record and through evolutionary history that close relatives of giraffes did not always have long necks. And if a giraffe were born today with a neck that wasn't as long, it would definitely struggle to eat some of the tall trees on the savanna. This is a kind of like an example of the camel where there's a very strange adaptation. You might have to dig a little bit deeper to find out why that organism has that trait, to find out how it's well suited for its environment. Some organisms have adaptations for staying warm. If you looked at lots of different types of bear, you'd find that the polar bear has by far different body composition in terms of its layer of fat and the type of fur that it has. And then the finding a mate adaptations. Of all the adaptations, these are probably the most outlandish and crazy. The peacock is just one example. Birds are notorious for having flashy displays in the male part of their population to get a mate. And it's not always how they look, but sometimes traits and adaptations related to mating has to do with behavior. Some birds do a flashy dance. Some bucks will fight with another buck to display dominance. So certain traits might not necessarily be what you look like, but also an ability to do something. So this is where you get to be creative today. You can certainly pick from my list. You can do some Googling today, but you and your group are going to choose just one adaptation that you find interesting. And it can be in a plant and it can be in an animal, either or. And think about if it would be cool if humans could have that too. Now remember, this does not have to be the adaptation that you ultimately use for the end of the project, but it might be. So if you think that humans could benefit from a really cool type of camouflage that it exists in nature, then take a closer look at it. So your idea for today is to research on just one adaptation and really focus in on it to investigate how that adaptation helps the organism survive. And then find out whether or not that could be adapted to humans. So you're going to choose one trait of a plant or animal that you think humans could benefit from, and you're going to create this as a film strip. Really, we're just going to create a slideshow about this trait and how you believe it came to be. So evolved or appeared or became more popular in the population. Remember, the traits that are the best for survival are the ones that tend to show up in the population the most. And you're going to create a short presentation to tell us about it. All right, so it does not have to look like a film strip, but this is kind of an example of how someone might present the peppered moths. So you can see that there are two peppered moth variations, two different traits, light colored and dark colored. Here's a picture of the peppered moths on a dark tree, so the tree bark might be polluted, and you can see that the bird easily catches the white moths because they show up. And over time, especially when the pollution was really high, the peppered moth population was mostly dark colored moths. So if you choose to make it like a series of steps in a timeline, like a film strip, you can simply just do Google Slides for this, but we really don't need to make it very long, just informative. So first we're going to brainstorm, and I want to talk to each group and see if we can get a whole bunch of unique things today. I'm going to try and talk to each group so we don't have any repeats. I'm going to explain to you how I would like you to research. You can plan your slideshow or your film strip in a graphic organizer, similar to what we've done before in a storyboard, and then you're going to make your presentation for the class. Okay, if you want, you can keep these roles for your team, but really we just need to work together to create this. Remember, this sounds kind of like the end of a presentation, or I'm sorry, the end of a project since we're doing a presentation, but it's really just giving us a basis for some ideas for our human survival product at the end of this project. So let's take a look at the lesson plan that's linked in lesson 4. And you can see that I've posted a warm-up. You can go back to the slides if you need to. All right, there is an Appendix A, which I'll link in here from my Mosamat guide with a whole bunch of choices for adaptations that you might like to use. You don't have to pick from this list, but I do want you to run it by me so I can approve it for you before you start the presentation research. Okay, the research guide is what we're going to use to document everything we learn about our animal or plant adaptation. And this is going to be a graded activity. For those of you in class, this can be a shared copy within the group. And it's just a place to document information, what you're researching, what is the adaptation, as well as list the URLs. So as long as you're listing your URLs here, you don't need to put them in your slideshow at the end. Okay, we are going to take a couple of days to research. I'll give you a storyboard planning document. If you're working from home, you don't need to worry about getting one of these documents. You can simply sketch out your ideas on paper. I just want you to think it through before you make the slides. And it's not a graded activity, so you don't need to worry about turning it in. The research guide is graded, but the storyboard is not. You're going to present your film strips or your slideshow to the class, and this will be an oral communication grade. And this is a get up in front of the class and talk. However, if you're at home doing this activity, you are certainly welcome to use Screencastify, and you'll be able to submit a link in this document. So I just need to update this for 2020. And you'll get a grade in oral communication and in knowledge and thinking. So my thought is that this lesson takes about 4 days. So for 2020, we're going to be working on this Monday through Thursday. And if any groups get done early or we get done early on presentation day, we're going to go ahead and work on the review sheet for the project post test, which is coming next week. I've chosen to do the post test prior to the end of the project where we make the human survival product, just so that all the stuff's fresh in our head. So if anything was confusing, email me. You can always watch this video again. And we are going to use the next 4 class periods to pick an adaptation, research it, plan out a presentation for our classmates, and maybe we'll get an idea for what we'd like to do for our human survival product for the end of our adaptation project.